Today's daf yomi is Kiddushin daf Yotes Boker Tov. Today's daf yomi. We start on the top of Yotes Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top. By Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish asked the following question: Mao Shemiyayid Adam with no katan. We know that when a person sells his daughter for being Amivriya, the master buys her, and the master can marry her or keep her as a slave. If he marries her, it's called yiyud, and then he has the option of marrying her himself or having his son marry her. So, can he marry her off to his son who's a minor? That's the question that the Gemara asks, because normally we do not allow minors. We don't recognize minors getting married if they're a boy. So, what about in this case? So, it says the Gemara, Adam of no katan, his son, the Torah says, which means beno koldahu. That means any son, even a minor. Odoma beno dum yodidei. Maybe it's the son like him. Mahu gadol, beno gadol, just like he is an adult. Also, his son has to be an adult. So it says Rabbi Zera Tashma. It says in the pasuk with respect to adultery. It says in the verse in Vayikra, the ish asher yanafas, ashes ish asher yanafas, ashes re'eu mos yumas and away final efes. The man who is adultery, the married woman. And what does this mean? Ish prat lakatan. A man who's adulterous excludes a minor. If a minor is adulterous, he's not going to be put to death. Asher yanafas, ashes who is adulterous with a married man comes to exclude pratla ashes katan. It excludes a wife of a minor, somebody who's adulterous with the wife of a minor, is not put to death because it's not a real marriage. The Amris miyayid, and if you would say that he can marry her off to his minor son, well then, if that would be the case, then came atzinu ishas lakatan. We do have a case of marriage to a minor, and so therefore, it proves from here that you can't do yid with your minor. So the Gemara says. So if that's the case, the Gemara says it just proves the opposite of what you're saying. Oh my, anal miyad. Well, if you can't marry off to his minor, am I coming my lake raw? Why do we need a pasuk to tell us it's not a marriage? Tivshot mina the miyad. Actually, we need to prove from this that he can do yiyud, and that's exactly the reason why we need the verse to tell us that it's not applicable under this scenario. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Ashi. Indeed, Rav Ashi says, what's the case we're talking about here? Why do we? What's the pasuk referring to when it says that you're not liable for adultery with the wife of a minor? We're talking about a child who's 9 years old in one day, and so such a child, habal yivamaso askinan, that he has. Let's say we're talking about a case where he has relations, he has bia with his yavama. So he consummates the marriage of bia with his sister-in-law because his brother died through bia. And it works even at 9 years old. Biblically speaking, she becomes the kuka to him through that bia, and she marries him. And so that's what the pasuk is telling us, that if you have adultery with such a woman, then you're not going to be liable. You might have thought that since biblically speaking, she is now married to the Yavam, to the 9-year-old, and it's a valid bia. I might have said that if you have relations, if you have bia with her, you're liable. Kamash one, you're not. So that's what that pasuk is referring to. It's not referring to the case of somebody who does yiyud with a minor. So the Gemara says, well, what's the answer in the end? My Havila, can you do yiyud with? Can you marry the Amavriya to your minor son? So what's the answer? Gemara says, Tashma Amar Rabbi Aibu Amar Rabbi Yanai Ein Yiyud El Begadol Ein Yiyud El Midas. The yiyud is only by an adult, and the yiyud meaning an adult person, not with a minor child, and the yiyud is only if the person has das, he only has knowledge, he has to have agency. The minor doesn't have it. So the Gemara says, Tarti, well, why do you need both answers? They're both saying the exact same thing. You need to be an adult and you need to have agency. No, the Gemara says, Matam Kamar. No, it's explaining it. Matam en yiyud el begadol. What's the reason there's only yiyud by an adult? Lefisha en yiyud el midas. Because there's only yiyud with knowledge. That's the reason why you can only do the marriage with an adult. By same or alternative answer, my midas. What does it mean when it says there's only yiyud with das? Midas tida. She has to be aware of it. The Tani Abaye, Brei Rabbi Avo, it says Asher lo ya'ada. That's what the verse says. You need to inform her about this next stage in the relationship, that she is being married to him. She needs to become aware of it. And who Tani Lavu Amarla, and he explains, he taught this, and he explains it, that what are we talking about here? We're talking about Bikidushe Yiyud. He taught the Brisa, and he explained it on his own. He says, this is the reason that you need to inform her of this, because it's the position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, who says that the first money, and I'm reading from the Rashi, the first money that she received, when the first money that her father received, the master buys the slave for whatever amount of money, and he gives the father money. That was not a betrothal money, and so therefore he's only going to actually betroth her with the money later on. So he needs to let her know about this. And this is what the Gemara says. This goes according to the position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. And so therefore, if that's the case, the father's consent at the outset is nothing, because he's going to betroth her later on. The initial money was not for betrothal. And so therefore, if he doesn't tell her about this now, then there's not going to be Kiddushin, as the Gemara says, or on the bottom of 19a. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, Mos Harishona Slava Kiddushin. The initial money that the father received, that was not for betrothal. So now, if the master wants to betroth her, he has to tell her about it. And Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, "Afil Kiddushin nitnu." He says you could even say that the initial money was for Kiddushin. Nevertheless, Shani Acha, this case is different, because the Amar Achmana Ya'ada, the Torah specifically says Ya'ada to tell us that she needs to know about it when she becomes betrothed. The Gemara says, okay, let's go dig a little deeper into his position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. What is his position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda? The Tanya, it says, Ya'ada v'efta. That means this is Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's position. Again, I'll say it outside, then we'll say it inside. That the initial money was not for Kiddushin, and so therefore he needs to betroth her now with whatever money is remaining in her, so to speak, sale, right? That she didn't work it all off yet. And this is the position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Tanya Adav Afta. There needs to be at least enough money in the day left, meaning to say, before she has completed her job, where she could redeem herself, where she still has value left, and she could buy it off. There's enough time left for her to do at least a pruta's worth of work. She'll be betrothed to the master. But otherwise, she can't be betrothed anymore, because she's already by forgiving the amount of money that she has to work for him, because she's already paid it all off at that point. She's already done all the work that she had contracted for, so to speak. Alma Kasavar, we see from here that Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's position is Alma Kasavar. We see from here that Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's position. Hold on, I lost my place. Alma Kasavar Mos Harishona Slava Kiddushin. That the initial money was not for Kiddushin, because we still need to have money left in the relationship, so to speak, that he could betroth her with. Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, "I feel Tema Kiddushin is Neshani Achad Amar Rachmana V'Afta." This case is different, because the Torah says specifically V'Afta. So therefore, since the Torah says specifically V'Afta, so it means to say that there needs to be a little bit of money left, and so you could even say that the initial money was for Kiddushin. So Rashi says, "Most Rishon Slava Kiddushin the Kibo Ava Manaslas Yayin the Kiddusha Yuyid." So why do we care? Because if the father had received the money in order to betroth her, and the Kiddusha Yuyid Tuyim Ba'av, and this was dependent upon the father, then even though there would not be time in the day left, it wouldn't matter. And since at any point he said within those 6 years you should become married to me, it would be good. It would become considered a yeyud l'mafreya retroactively from the moment of the sale. That's the basic distinction. Whether or not the initial money was the initial act of the Kiddushin or the Kiddushin is taking place later on and within those 6 years. Now the Gemara is going to flesh out several implications of this halacha, this dispute, whether the initial money was for Kiddushin. Amar Rav Nachman, Omer Adam Lobito Kedana, a man can say to his minor daughter, Tzivi Kibui Kiddushech. He could go out there and say, you go out, even though she's a minor, she doesn't technically speaking have agency. He could say to his minor daughter, go out and receive the Kiddushin. Why? Neither Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. This is based upon the initial position of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Because doesn't Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Lav Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, Mos HaRishon Slava Kiddushin. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says the initial money was not, that the father got, was not for Kiddushin. Chimeshayar Ba'ashava Pruta, Have a Kedusha. And as long as there's a Pruta left, which basically is giving to the daughter by marrying her when she still has a Pruta's worth of work to do, he's basically saying to her, I'm marrying you with this Pruta. So he's giving that money to the daughter. So the daughter, how could she accept it? She's a minor. So according to Rav Yossi Bar Yehuda, the father didn't accept it. So we see that the daughter is accepting it now on behalf of the father. So that's the idea, that the father could send out the daughter to receive the money, just like because we learned this out from the fact that the daughter can accept the betrothal in the middle of the 6 years. Second teaching, Amar Rav Nachman, Amakadesh b'malva b'milva sheyesh alei mashkon mikudeshes. Let's say you want to, and we had learned earlier in the tractate back on Daf Ches that you can betroth somebody with the benefit that they get of not having to return the loan. So what we're talking about here is somebody says, I want to betroth you with the loan, but you gave me a collateral for that loan. So even though you're holding the collateral, we're still going to say it's a valid betrothal. How so? This is also the case of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. Didn't Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda say, Mos HaRishonos, Kiddushin Nitnu? The father, when he got money, that wasn't for a betrothal. It was not for a betrothal. And the actual marriage, that's going to be with the later money that you have left over in the relationship with the daughter is working. And so therefore, Hay Alva, this debt, this money that's, so to speak, contained within what the daughter has to work, that's a loan. That's basically a loan from the father to the master. That's basically a loan that the master has given to the father, and the daughter is working it off. The gufa mashkoni, and this girl is the mashkon for the debt, and that's what he's collecting is shibud from. He's collecting his debt from. And so, if there's a pruta left, umiyayid have a kiddushin. That would be a valid betrothal. So therefore, it's the same case. You could betroth somebody with the money and the mashkon, and you're working off the mashkon. So that's exactly the same cases here. Okay, we're on top of 19b. So the Gemara now is going to talk a little bit more in the same context, how we get into the process of yiyud. Tan Rabbanan, Keitzad Mos. Excuse me, too early in the morning. Keitzad Mitzvahs Yiyud. We had in our base medrash last night, there was like 40 people here. Fire mishmar. So we got very tired. So Keitzad Mitzvahs Yiyud. How do you do the mitzvah of Yiyud? Omer la b'fnei shnayim. You stay in front of two people. Harei mekudeshesli. Even though he's already acquired the girl from the father, he now takes her in front of two people and says, "You're betrothed to me." Harei muresesli. You're married to me. Afilu b'sov sheish. Even at the end of 6 years, he can do this. Afilu samach l'shkiyas achama. Even close to sunset. V'noeg ba minog ishus. And he then behaves with her like a husband. But he doesn't treat her anymore like a like a like a slave, but now she's his wife. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, "Em yeshos b'yom kedei la'asos im moshava pruta bekudeshes." We have more of an inam bekudeshes. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, this is the position we saw in Amanaf, says there needs to be enough time left in the 6 years for her to do a pruta's worth of work. Otherwise, she's not betrothed. Mashal Omer Isha. It's a parable like somebody who says to a woman, "His God shili miachshav achar shloshim yom." A man says to a woman, "Become betrothed to me now." He says to her, "Become betrothed to me now." After 30 days. So what's he really saying when he says that? Uva acher, and then another person comes in the meantime. V'kitcha b'sol shloshim yom, and then she becomes betrothed. And another person comes within those 30 days and betroths her. Shemikudeshos Rishon. So under this circumstance, she's betrothed to the first one. So this mashal, where a person says, "Become betrothed to me from now until after 30 days," and then man number two comes and betroths her within those 30 days, we say she's betrothed to the first one. So does this parable support the position of the Tanakama or of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda? Remember, the Tanakama's position here is that as long as he says you're betrothed to me, even at any point in the 6 years, she's married. Even if she doesn't have a shava pruta left worth of work. Whereas Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says it's only valid if she has a pruta's worth of work left to do. So who does this parable support? Mashal man ilim and Mashal Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda can't be according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda because he says Hayim yeshos b'yom kedei la'asos imo shav pruta mekudeshes v'mlav lo. He says she's not married yet because she still has to do a little bit more. She has to do some work for him. So therefore, if she's not married yet, she in the parable case, she should have been married to the second person who came along. So Amar Vacha Brei the Rabba Mashal Rabbanan. It's a parable to the Rabbanan. He says she's not married. He says she's really married to the first one, and that's why he just let's say around Mikudeshusly, because the initial money that he gave to the father was the money to betroth her. So Gemara says, "Well, Pshita, that's so obvious. So why does it even need to say it?" The Gemara says, "No, even though he didn't say the language in this case, he says, I'm marrying you from now to 30 days. Let's say he didn't say me'achshav. So he might have thought he needs to say me'achshav, that he needs to say from now. Meaning to say, the master, when he gave the money to the father, he didn't say that she'll be betrothed from right now. And nevertheless, the Rabbanan say the Kiddushin take effect right away. Another bright, so Tanya Idach Mocher Spito, let's say somebody sells his daughter, and after he sells her to be a slave, somebody else comes along and he betroths her to him in the marketplace. So well, in that case, since he just sold her to the first man, he didn't marry her to the first man. He basically played a trick on the first guy, and she's betrothed to the second one. That's Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's position. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says she's not betrothed to the first guy. She's only going to be betrothed later on in the relationship. So therefore, if another guy comes along in the middle, it's a valid marriage. The Chum say no. The first guy still has his rights. And he says the first guy still has the rights. The master still has the rights. He can marry her. Mashal Omer Isha, and it's a parable like a man says to a woman, you're betrothed to me after 30 days. And somebody else comes and betroths her within those 30 days. She's betrothed to the second one. And this parable supports whom? If you want to say the parable is like the Rabbanan, the rabbis say that he can always betroth her, which means she's married to the first person. The parable supports the case of Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda. She's not married to the master yet. She's married to the second guy who comes along. So Gemara says, well, this was obvious. Pshita. No, it wasn't this obvious. Gemara says, no. No, he didn't say to her at the outset, you'll be married to me after 30 days in that case. He just said, what did he say? Look at Rashi. Shita Mao de Tema. Hello Amar. Hello Amarla. Hello Amarle. Bishas Matamos. He didn't say to him when he gave him the money on the condition that you'll become married to me after this time. And that's why Rabbi Yossi says that she's betrothed to the second one. But where he said, become betrothed to me after 30 days, even though he didn't say from right now, we would say that since it would take effect and she'd be betrothed to the first one if she wants at the end of 30 days. So we say we don't say that. Kamash one, the Damu Adadi, that the two cases, according to Rabbi Yossi Yehuda, are the same. Because since the Torah, to give the Torah cost of Yiyud b'mos alo acharzman, since according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, or according to the Rabbanan, since the verse states that this Yiyud, this marriage is going to say goes back to this money after a period of time. Meikaki avinu avinu, and that's when he gave her the money initially. That's why he gave it to her. That if he wants to betroth her with this money, she's married. But still, we say since he didn't say Me'al Shav, according to Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, she's betrothed to the second one. That's the Chiddush. Okay, third case. Tanya Ida Chamochar Spito. Let's say, so now we're going back to what we saw at the end of Gittin. Can you make a stipulation against the conditions of the Torah? Tanya Ida Chamochar Spito, somebody who sells his daughter, Upasak, and he makes a stipulation on Manash Shalol Yayid. Says, I'm selling you my daughter, but you cannot marry her. Meaning to say, she's going to go free after 6 years or at the age of 12. Niskayim Atanai. Well, that's a valid condition. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. You can sell the girl on the condition that he does not marry her. Chum say, no, we can ignore the condition. If he wants to marry her, he can. Why? Because this condition goes against the Torah. Whoever makes a condition against the Torah, the condition is canceled, and the initial agreement is valid, and we ignore the condition. Gemara says, wait 1 second. So you're saying, according to Rabbi Meir, who says that it's a valid condition, Rabbi Meir says you can even make a condition against the Torah. Meir says explicitly, let's say you marry a girl and you say in the condition, I don't have to provide for you food, clothing, or intimacy. Rabbi Meir says you're married and the condition's canceled. So we see from here, Rabbi Meir says if you make a condition against the Torah, the condition is canceled. So that contradicts what we said in the first source where he says it's not. Before we answer the contradiction, we finish the source. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda says, if it will be a monetary thing, you can make a stipulation, even though it seems against the Torah, because that you're allowed to waive. So that means with respect to food and clothing, you can waive your right. She can waive her rights, but not with respect to intimacy. That was a matter of the body, and so that is not subject to being waived. So anyway, we have this contradiction because Rabbi Meir in the first source says you can make a stipulation not to marry that he's not allowed to marry the slave, the Amlev. And the second source, Rabbi Meir says you can't stipulate against the Torah. So how do we explain this? Amar Chizkiah comes along to explain it. Shani Acha the Amar Kra la'ama pam la'ama. The pasuk says, and so therefore it says in this pasuk, which means that sometimes you're only selling her just to be an Amma. So Remeir as a pasuk, it's not stipulating against the Torah, it's a verse telling you sometimes you only sell her to be an Amma. The Rabbanan who say, i.e. Rabbi Yehuda here who says you can't, the Chum say you can't stipulate against the Torah. How would they explain the word Lama? The rabbis learning like the following brisa that says Lama Malamed Shemochro Psulim. It teaches us that you sell her, that you're allowed to sell her to people who she's not allowed to marry. What does Rashi says? That these are people who are, there's a prohibition against marrying them, but if you marry them, the Kiddushin is valid. Like a mamzer or nasin, that he's not so therefore she's not allowed to marry them. So basically you're selling her to them only for shiftless, only to be a slave. The Gemara says, but why do we need a pasuk to tell us that? Valodinu, isn't it a kavachomer? If she actually was betrothed to them, like to a mamzer, we would say it's valid, even though it's a prohibition. William Karenal, for sure she could be sold to them. So the Gemara says, no, we break that kavachomer. Why? Well, no. Makachel psum has a value, has a aspect to it. Because a person can betroth his daughter even when she's in Nara, even when she's between 12 and 12 and a half. Yim Karenal psum, can we learn a kavachomer that he could sell her to such psum? He can't sell his daughter when she's over the age of 12. So being betrothing is actually stronger than selling. So therefore, the pasuk can say and that teaches us that he can sell her also to people to whom she's not allowed to marry. Rabbi Eliezer says, if the word la'ama is to tell us that he's allowed to sell her to psulin, the pasuk already says, if it's bad in the eyes of the master, which means to say that he's not allowed to marry her, because let's say he's a mamzer and a sin. We already know that. So therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, why did it say the words lama? It's to tell us that he's allowed to sell her to relatives. That's the idea. Even though that there is no yiyud to relatives, meaning to say, even though she can't marry these relatives, he's still allowed to sell her to her. So the Gemara says, well, why do we need to sell her to them? Well, why do we need a pasuk? Isn't that a kavachomer? Valodinu, and machor psulim, if he's allowed to sell her to the people who are disqualified, like a mamzer, and it's disgusting to be enslaved to somebody who's apostle. So that's what the Ritva explains. So for sure, William Kareno Lekrovim for sure should be allowed to sell it to relatives. Where it says, no, you can't make that kavachomer. Why? The psulin, they could actually marry her. In Kareno Lekrovim, but the relatives, like a brother or an uncle, you can't marry them. I mean, an uncle you can marry, a brother or a father. So, well, a father wouldn't be the case. So a brother or who knows, brother. Well, so the Gemara says, Amarkra, therefore, Rabbi Eliezer says we need the pasuk that tells us you can marry to the relatives, that she could sell her to the relatives. Rameir Upsua Nafkula, Mehecha de Nafkula, Rabbi Eliezer Bekrovim. So Rameir says, I don't need a pasuk of La'ama to tell us that you could sell her to the relatives. He learns it out from the fact that you could sell her to Psulim. Just like Rabbi Eliezer derives it, that you can, just like from the same pasuk that Rabbi Eliezer learns to say that you could sell her to the relatives, meaning to say, so Savak Rabbanan da Amar, and so therefore we need to say there. So and the fact that he could sell it to relatives. And so therefore he doesn't need a pasuk to tell us that you can sell it to relatives, because he says that you can't sell it, that you can't sell it to the relatives. Okay, we'll stop the vort here, the recording here, and then